on in this segment. Let's get started with the Sunday showdowns and the big one on the schedule this week down in Dallas between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Dallas offense, it's been on fire with Dak Prescott completely slinging the football. Meanwhile, folks in Philly, not really thrilled about the way their offense is running.
Oh,
they're staging
10-2
protests for a 10-2 team because they don't, as our pal Patrick Claybon would say, run the dang ball quite enough. We'll see if that changes this week against a good Cowboy defense. We're talking a lot about Jalen Hurts and his health. That's been a big topic of conversation this week. Allegedly.
Just a little.
I love that David Carr and Bakersfield were trending side by side, unrelated, but trending side by side. And I understand the essence of what David Carr was saying. And there's a lot of fantasy merit to it because it is one of those things like you want to see Jalen Hurts run the football. That's one of the things that's made him so good in fantasy, which is why I would go ahead and advocate starting him in this contest. I do know that there were opportunities on Sunday where it felt like, why aren't they doing the brotherly shove here? And they kind of got away from it. Could they be running the ball a little bit too much? Perhaps. But I think that in a pivotal contest against the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to see the best of Jalen Hurts. Everybody in Philadelphia needs to calm down. What if you won like 26 out of your last 28? You're fine. You want to live the life of a Bears fan? I'll invite you to do that. Play Jalen Hurts, stop protesting, and just enjoy the show.
Yeah, fantasy managers everywhere probably like me, remember losing a championship when Jalen Hurts sat out last week. We need him to play every single game, and that's why I think you could sit the Cowboys defense in this one. They only scored 2 fantasy points against the Eagles in Week 9. They have allowed 26 or more points in each of their last 4 games against the Eagles, and they've been bullies this year. They beat up on the bad offenses that they have played, but against the Niners, Chargers, Eagles, Seahawks, the 4 best offenses they've played this year, fewer than 5 fantasy points in every game.
I think you got to go with Brandon Cooks this week. I mean, like he started off to a slow start. The last few weeks, though, really has picked things up. And part of it is that Mike McCarthy is starting to move his wide receivers around. So we're seeing more slot opportunities for Brandon Cooks. That is where the Eagles have especially struggled. Philly has allowed the most passing yards to slot-aligned pass catchers. This should be a pretty high-scoring game, so I think a lot of the Cowboys pass catchers very much in play against Philadelphia this week. Meanwhile, as for the team that the Cowboys faced last week, it's the Seattle Seahawks taking on the team that the Eagles faced last week in the San Francisco 49ers. We saw this on Thanksgiving with Seattle's offense getting shut down by San Francisco. Anything that you think will be different this time around?
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake to sit DK Metcalf in this one. Even though the 49ers did a really nice job against him, it's a different game. You can't really look at what happened in the past. I got caught up looking at StatMuse earlier this week, which, by the way, you guys do it upside down. Like, put the number the other way. Like, but that notwithstanding, I would still start DK Metcalf. The 49ers are still vulnerable through the air, and I think it would be a big mistake just to look at one game, especially that was on a short week, and be like, well, this guy can't play against the 49ers. He certainly can. He's done it in the past. I think he'll rebound, and I look for him to get about 80 yards and a touchdown, so I'm starting DK Metcalf.
Who would ever advise sitting DK Metcalf?
Nobody.
I think in this one on the other side, you could start all of your 49ers. Brock Purdy is an MVP candidate. CMC should be as well. And him and Tyreek are the most obvious must-start players in fantasy history right now. Debo is snatching chains again, as Marcus puts it. Ayuk routinely scoring double digits and brings a high ceiling. Kittle, I know he disappointed a couple weeks ago against Seattle, but he's a tight end that brings a very high ceiling. You could play the 49ers defense in this as Geno Smith is banged up right now. Just all of your 49ers, get them in your starting lineup.
I'm going to need to be on camera for this one. So, Jose, if you don't mind, can we get it over here? Yeah, right here. Do not play a Seattle running back this week. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, DJ Dallas, Kenny McIntosh, Sean Alexander, Kurt Warner with a C. I don't care. Don't play any of them against this 49ers defense. They have been one of the toughest run defense. They and the Bears have allowed the fewest rushing yards this season. They've allowed the 3rd fewest rushing touchdowns. Plus, I'm expecting this to be a negative game script. I'm thinking Seattle's playing from behind, which means more pressure on the passing game, which probably lends more to DK Metcalf having a big game. If you can avoid a Seattle running back, I would absolutely do it this week. On to the Bills and the Chiefs, a big one, especially for the Buffalo Bills. Our research team dubbed this as a matchup between 2 underperforming elite quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. So, Rank, what are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, I know that Patrick Mahomes, a lot of people have questions about this because if you took him this season, you're probably struggling or you're probably not as comfortable as you thought you were going to be as automatic. But I feel really good about starting him this week against the Buffalo Bills, who have struggled against quarterbacks in recent weeks. As a matter of fact, the Bills have allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last month. You know, we've heard, listen, we're all on the internet. We all saw what Sean McDermott was saying. I don't like it. I don't like it, and I think that this is an absolute get-right game for the Kansas City Chiefs, so I'm firing up Patrick Mahomes with the utmost of confidence.
Josh Allen is underperforming, yet only 6 teams in the NFL have more touchdowns than he does this year. I think, though, you could play Rashee Rice in this one. Chiefs leading receiver, that's no longer a question. He has led the team in targets and catches each of the last 2. We know he brings a safe floor, but he's starting to show more upside as of late, and I agree with Rank. I think the Chiefs are going to have to throw in this one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Also, while we're on this, Isaiah Pacheco has not practiced this week. Jerick McKinnon, go try to check your waiver wire if he's available out there.
Ooh, so Jet McKinnon may be back in play. On the other side, be a little bit concerned about James Cook, and this isn't just a straight-up bench get away from James Cook thing, but look, he's really splitting opportunities with Latavius Murray. He did have a season-high 7 targets last week, but the passing game usage has been inconsistent all year long. Kansas City has given up just 5 rushing touchdowns, the second fewest receiving yards to running backs. Now, maybe this being a high-scoring game sort of helps, but it also feels like this is one of those games where Josh Allen kind of goes out and plays hero ball, and maybe you don't see as many touches for James Cook as you would like. Finally, we got the Rams and the Ravens. Baltimore, arguably the best team in the AFC, certainly one of the best defenses in the NFL. But, Rank, are you on board with any Rams this week?
You're besmirching the Dolphins like that? Listen, listen.
One of the.
We're talking one of the. That was, listen, here's the thing, though. I'm going to start Kyren Williams in this game. I know a lot of people might look at this matchup and be like, I don't want to start a running back against this Ravens defense, which is admittingly pretty good. But here's the thing, like Kyren Williams has this backfield to himself. Like he's not competing with anybody for touches. It's not a committee by any stretch of the imagination. Sean McVay loves garbage time touchdowns as much as we do. Like there's everything to like about this outside of the matchup. So yeah, there's no way you're getting me off of Kyren Williams unless you have like CMC and Alvin Kamara as your 2 running backs. Then perhaps we would have a conversation. But I love Kyren Williams.
That you flex him, and he is a must-play every single week. And on the other side, Keaton Mitchell is a sleeper here. He led the Ravens' backfield in snaps, carries, and targets in their last game before the bye. Now there might be a potential post-bye bump for the rookie running back, but he is so explosive. He is always a threat to take it the distance, which means he brings a lot of upside for fantasy football. The more volume he gets, the more chances that he goes boom and has a big play. If you're going a little bit deeper at running back, he brings a lot of upside to your lineup this week.
I'm telling you, you can start Puka Nacua, and this is just kind of a moment of reassurance here. I know the matchup isn't great on paper. Baltimore giving up the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. But they are giving up a lot of catches, more than 13 receptions per game to the position. Puka's has at least 7 targets in every single game, and more than 10% of his targets have come on design plays. Shout out to Graham Barfield and the folks at Fantasy Points for charting that sort of thing. The Rams are finding ways to get the football in his hands. So even in a situation where it doesn't necessarily look great on paper, Puka's going to get his opportunities. You can stick with him in your lineups. That gets us back to our Sunday showdowns. The Lions, you saw them there. They are fighting for the 1 seed, and they are playing outdoors this week against the Chicago Bears. So, Rank, who do you like in this matchup?
Well, I'm going to look, not surprisingly, I'm going to go with the Chicago Bear. I'm going to go with DJ Moore. For whatever reason, I know. I've gotten a couple of questions about this. I think mostly because the game plan 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, ton of screen passes, but I do anticipate them trying to stretch the field a little bit more in this contest. And when they do, they're going to be looking at DJ Moore. He's had at least 20 fantasy points in 4 full games with Justin Fields. They have fully locked in on him. And when you've seen Justin Fields have monster games, it's because DJ Moore and him are clicking on a high level. So get DJ into your lineup.
Yeah, I think DJ Moore is a must-start this week. I think Justin Fields is as well. He's gone for 100 or more yards in 3 straight games against the Lions, who also happen to allow the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. Fields has topped 21 in 3 of his last 4 full games, and the Lions have allowed 21 or more to quarterbacks in 3 of their last 4. Good matchup, lots of running. Get him in your lineup.
Meanwhile, I think you should be wary of starting Jared Goff this week. He is a domesticated feline playing in the out of doors. It's going to be cold there. Now, the good news is It may not be super windy, which is really what you worry about with quarterbacks trying to throw the football, but we're talking about a guy from Northern California dealing with temperatures in the 30s. Plus, the last time these teams faced off against each other, Goff threw 3 interceptions. That was back in Week 11. And Detroit has been actually surprisingly run-heavy. I guess when you have guys like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to give them some opportunities there. So should be one to watch, though, coming up this week. It's backup quarterbacks. When we talk about the Colts and the Bengals, we got Gardner Minshew against Jake Browning. Browning looked good last week. Does he keep it rolling this week?
He did, and one of the reasons why he was playing so well is that the effectiveness of Joe Mixon, who is an absolute must-start for me in this contest. One of the things that stood out to me was how well he was catching the football, or how well he's been catching the football, because he's had at least 5+ receptions in 3 out of his last 5 games. That didn't happen at all in the first 7 games of the season. He has 6 touchdowns over his last 6 games, which has been a monster improvement. So start Joe Mixon for sure this week.
Jake Browning looks good, but it did not lead to a lot of fantasy success for T. Higgins, so I think you could sit him here. He was 5th on the Bengals alone last week with just 3 targets. The Colts have allowed the fewest yards to receivers since Week 9, and they use zone coverage at the highest rate in the NFL. T. Higgins has struggled against zone this year. He's a big name. He could always surprise, but I would try to play it safe and get him out of our lineups.
I think if you're looking for a sleeper wide receiver, maybe take a look at Alec Pierce. We'd been trying to sort of make it happen with Josh Downs, and that really wasn't clicking. In the meantime, Pierce is closing the gap in targets with Downs, and he's got a much larger average depth of target. If I'm going to get a guy with minimal target opportunities, I want the guy who can get yards in chunks right now. That is Alec Pierce against a secondary that is giving up lots of big plays down the field. Over to the Broncos and Chargers. Both of those teams coming off a loss last week, but both of them have a lot of fantasy boom or bust potential. Anybody you think balls out in this one, Rank?
Well, I know a lot of the fans in Denver are wondering if I'm back on with the Broncos. I certainly am. I have you winning this game at SoFi Stadium, and a big reason why is because of Russell Wilson. I think that he comes out and has a great contest against this Chargers defense, which has been one of the most generous to opposing quarterbacks this season. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to the position. And Russell Wilson's starting to run a little bit, too. He has rushing touchdowns in back-to-back games. So as Russ said himself, let's ride.
I have Russ as a start as well this week. I think on the other side, Gerald Everett is a sleeper here. 8 or more fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, so he brings a pretty safe floor. The Broncos are in the top 3 in catches, yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points allowed to tight ends. That's all the stats we really care about. And he gets them again in championship week, so if you've been streaming tight ends, stream him this week and hold on to him throughout the playoffs.
Like Rank mentioned, I like Russell Wilson this week. I also like Jerry Jeudy as a sleeper. I know he has just 1 touchdown this season, but he's consistently been the number 2 passing option behind Courtland Sutton. The Chargers secondary has struggled, giving up a lot of explosive plays. I think this could be a week that Jerry Jeudy actually kind of gets going. Maybe has one of his better games of the season.